Okay, welcome everybody to this session on laboratories. I'm very happy to have Brian let me do this. From the very beginning, I was wondering about laboratories myself, and throughout the weeks, people have been asking about laboratories. So I thought maybe we would do this. And we have a really nice group. It's about 50 people. And I thought I would introduce them. Here we go. I think we're all interested in laboratories and concerned right now about how that's going to go. And I just wanted to lay out maybe what are three main priorities for us today. First one, of course, is safety of students, staff, and faculty. This is a primary concern we always have in laboratories and sciences, and we just have a very particularly challenging opportunity here to be creative in the next few months. And second priority is, guess what? Safety of students, staff, and faculty, I think. And you're going to guess what number 3 is as well. So that's what we're going to talk about. And actually, we have other concerns in terms of what are the expectations for the laboratory experience for students? How are we going to manage this in terms of those of us who are fully online or partially online? And just in the room itself, what does it even mean to have 6-foot distance? So there's a lot to talk about. I don't expect to get through all that today, but I think the wonderful thing about these workshops has been that we've gotten to talk with people who are from other institutions. And so that's what we're going to do today. And I've tried to design some breakout rooms that really get us mixed up pretty well. And I want to show you who we have. So this is the group as of yesterday afternoon, I believe. Quite a nice spread. And by discipline, here we are today. We have quite a nice distribution of affiliations of discipline. We have some non-affiliated who are going to be randomly put into some breakout groups as well. Now, my plan is to get us going very quickly into breakout rooms and then come back and have a general discussion. We've set these breakup groups by discipline. And so there's one for art, nursing, and psychology. I think there are 3 groups for biology, 3 groups for chemistry and biochemistry, 2 for physics. And the basic task for you in these breakout rooms is to discuss issues and ideas that your institution is having within your discipline relating to laboratories. What I'd like to do this time is share with you a Google document that is a joint document among all of us that we will be using. When you get to your breakout room, one or more of you should link into this document. I'll get this into the chat in a minute. Or Brian, you probably have that link and maybe you can put it in chat from our email?
Yes.
Yeah. Brian will put that in the chat right now, and we'll get going. I will open the floor. I'm going to stop sharing. And open the floor for just a few minutes to anybody who wants to make any kind of comments before we get into our breakout rooms, questions about what we're doing, suggestions for really good questions that you'd like to address, anything you want for a few minutes while we're getting those set up.
Well, this is Jennifer Templeton at Knox College. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes.
Down last time. But I'm concerned about dealing with labs that require, plants or mounts of animals or skulls, where we've got all these skulls in the room, for example, and the students are going to key them out to what order they belong to. and we're not going to have any sort of equity between online students and off. I'm considering lab buddies, where each person who is actually live in the lab has a partner who is online, or a couple of partners, and use their phone. But that's where I am so far.
So this might be probably something that's better just focused on in the biology one breakout room, but it strikes me that there's so many really cool digital materials for both chemistry and for skeletal anatomy, like in CT scans and things. And I think it would be pretty straightforward to get some of those 3D models into at least digitally, into the hands of students. What strikes me, sort of just underscoring what Jennifer just said, is that equity becomes a really big issue, because for the students who are online, the ones who maybe have a whole lot of people in competition for one computer at their home or something like that, those students are going to be the most likely to have a hard time with complex digital files. And so that equity thing is what really gets me.
All right, so questions about what we're going to do for these breakout rooms. Work fast to fill in information in the Google Doc. The Google Doc basically has a section for, maybe I'll share my screen on that so you can see what we're looking at. Okay, so basically this is a Google Doc that has headers over here on the left. You can click on them quickly to get to your area. And I have nominally put it in as two basic ideas. A room to just sort of brainstorm on some of the issues that you're concerned about, and possible solutions that your institution is considering or has decided upon to address those issues. And then when we come back, we'll go through these different areas, because I think also, besides talking about different institutions, it's really be good to see from chemistry what biology doing, and maybe that's some ideas from physics. And then this document will be for you, and that will be the day. So thumbs up, thumbs down, how'd that go? Learn something? I haven't looked at the Google Doc, but I hope you were putting some things in there. And I'd like to open up the floor. We have 30 minutes. So that's a good amount of time to do some follow-up here. But I would like volunteers from the different groups. Okay, so basically what we got to do is we got to talk to people who are in our discipline. And even though there were maybe 3 chemistry groups or 3 biology groups, you did have a common document. So if you take the time at your leisure to look through that a little bit, you might learn a few more things or get a few more ideas. What we can do now is share some ideas that maybe our group talked about that are more general among the disciplines, not just chemistry or not just biology, or concerns that seemed universal, that weren't just your discipline. So I hope people will, let's start with some of those concerns that came up, not necessarily solutions, but why don't we spend 10 minutes or so?
I'll take a stab at one.
Right.
Bob, there was one of the concerns we had was when you have these pairs of students where one is remote and one is in class, that solves the social distance problem. But there's kind of just no way that that's anywhere close to equitable between the student who's in class and the student who's not. And there's, you could say, yeah, let's switch them every week or whatever, but even then, there's going to be imbalances, and there's going to be pretty serious inequities, and there's going to there's kind of no possible way that it's really anywhere close to equitable when you have those kind of pairings.
So a general issue there across everything would be equity, student experience equity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not perfect, but has anybody got anything any better? I mean, otherwise we can't do any labs.
And
So,
my thought is there's no reason at that point to not just be all online and do data analysis, do virtual anatomy or whatever with CT scans. There's lots of digital tools. There's lots of papers to discuss. There's data to analyze as groups. And I guess my thought and what I got as a general sense from our group was just we're lying to ourselves if we think that having a buddy system is any better than just being totally online.
Well, that shut everything down.
Sorry to put the kibosh on the conversation there.
No, listen, as a moderator, I'm going to say that I'm going to be quiet and I'm just going to let people hang out until someone says something. So sometimes it takes people a little longer to formulate something, and I don't think we should be afraid of silence.
no, but this really is the key issue. Should we just give up and be all online and do data analysis? Or should we try to give some in-lab experience? And with the numbers we got to deal with, I can't give it to everybody. So swapping in and out for me seems like it's worth a try. And is quite likely we'll end up with completely online by the end of the semester anyhow.
Yeah, and so my thought is, especially because it's quite likely that we're all going to be online by the end of the term anyway, I guess I don't see it as giving up. I see it as saying, what are the great tools that we can do? I found 75 skulls of CT scans of skulls online. I teach comparative anatomy. That's more skulls than I have in the lab right now. Like, if we embrace that and just say, hey, what's the greatest class that I can put forward to put online? I don't think that's giving up. I think that's seeing different possibilities and making the best of those and just committing to that now, so that I don't have to prep an online course and an in-person course.
Well, and we talked in our class. Oh, go ahead, Laura.
No, well, I was going to say I agree about that it's not giving up, that it may be a reasonable decision. And George, because you and I are teaching a course together, we can have this conversation later. But I'm beginning to feel like it may be in our best interest to plan to be online and just do the very best that we possibly can being online, and not looking at it as giving up, as this is an opportunity to do the very best I can online for my students, and it's more equitable. I'm starting to lean that way.
And we were talking a little bit about how, like, if you use my career as an example, I get my data from spacecraft, and I don't go into the lab and take measurements, right? So maybe what I can do is really, and I collaborate with far-flung collaborators and send lots of emails back and forth and have lots of phone calls. So maybe this is an opportunity to say, you know what, this semester, by necessity, we're going to just, we're going to be online. So let's embrace this opportunity to learn a different set of skills than you would normally learn in this class, but a set of skills that are valuable nonetheless.
So the idea is called laboratory fishbowl. I'm going to be in lab. You're not. You're my students. But I'm going to do an extraction. You're going to tell me how to do it? Or I'm going to be making all sorts of mistakes and you're going to tell me everything I'm doing wrong about this. I don't know. Could that somehow substitute for the student to a certain extent doing it themselves? I mean, I don't know.
What about throughput? So is this the whole class watching you, or are you doing this with each group?
Ask no questions, because I only came up with this 1 minute ago. But
okay.
You tell me. What about 4 students in lab and 16 outside of lab? and
Yeah.
they're in a group of 5. And one student, it's their breakout room. Okay, it's a breakout room. It's a Zoom. It's a breakout room. But one of those students happens to be in a physical space called a laboratory, and they're going to do something. You could even make it so they're not allowed to do anything that they're not told to do. That's a famous technique. Could you learn something? Could you learn how to do chromatography that way? Or I don't know.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about is that you've got a lab partner and one of you's present and one of you's off, one of you's remote, and you're swapping back and forth for different labs. But what I wanted to add is that person on the phone might actually read the directions. And having a lab partner who's reading the directions might be an interesting thing to try.
Someone from my group want to talk about this? We had some discussion about the one-on-one. Or other groups.
Well, I'm starting to see, actually linking, Bob, what you're talking about with the Fishbowl, and George, the one remote, one in lab, but we could have fewer actually physically in lab and have several simultaneous Fishbowls, right? So one person in lab and a bunch of people reading the directions kind of meshes what George and Bob are saying here.
There's this Carleton study that was, raise your hand if you're from Carleton. Someone here is from Carleton. Carleton did some kind of study where they had a bunch of faculty in the room and 18 in the room and 10 outside the room. And at least this was a lecture course, discussion course, and they quickly came to the conclusion that there's no possible way they could do this with mixed groups, some in and some out. But I think that was an ambient noise problem, that because the students inside were physically separated and had to speak relatively loudly to each other, they couldn't filter out the other groups.
So what I'm picturing is a big lab that's socially distanced, that students are spread all around the room, and their partner is on a computer at that so I agree. I don't see any way you could have 16 people simultaneously discussing, but working with a partner, that seems doable.
So we had some discussion, actually it wasn't called a fishbowl idea, but that the person, like the instructor might be just the person with the hands. And then it was also that a proposal that maybe you had TAs, or a couple of people who are like TAs who would do the same kind of thing. So really still no students actually doing it, but more people who had some experience that you would be the hands and taking direction. It was also brought up though that if there are too many Zoom conversations going on, that there's a reverberation. One of the people in our group is a technical person, and so there are issues with trying to, have simultaneous feedbacks to different groups apparently.
I think you can get around the simultaneous feedback issue if the students just wear headphones or have like earbuds or something, because then there wouldn't be the projected audio in the room to feedback.
Change the subject a little around just to try to draw some out. Personal protective equipment and masks, and are there issues with that? Face shields, masks in a chemistry or biology or other wet lab experience? For example, I'll just say, I know some of my biologists at St. Olaf were concerned about microscope.
I've heard a good solution for like sharing microscopes is just some saran wrap like over the eyepieces that just gets disposed of in between uses. Shouldn't affect being able to see through the eyepieces so much, and a nice barrier.
Our department has discussed the idea that masks are just like clothing for students. They're their personal responsibility to have, to wash, to clean, that it wouldn't be our responsibility to do that sort of thing.
Co-College has done something similar to what you're saying, Bob, that everybody is responsible for having their masks and their students and cleaning it as well. And then faculty is being given the face shield as well as the mask, and that's just like you said, your normal attire on campus. And so whenever you're in the office or whether you're in the lab or you're in the classroom, those are the things that you're going to have on. When you're in front of the classroom, you won't have the mask though. So in case anybody who is, a lip reader, you can still see that, but you would have the face shield over the top of the instructor's face, while the students would be wearing masks.
What was raised about masks in an article was, like, for example, in a chemistry lab where you may be using, hopefully you're in the hood or whatever, but that the mask does need to be quickly removable. So whether it ties behind the head or has elastic, like if something would get splashed on the mask and the student needs to quickly remove it. So I know we're considering buying separate masks that the student would leave in the lab. So they would wear whatever mask they want to lab. When they get to lab, they're going to put this other mask on so that we know that they can get it off quickly if there is an issue.
And that would be supplied by the department.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So has anybody thought about protocols for labs that students will follow? Like Cassie, what you were saying, that you have your own mask. When you get to the lab, you put on your lab coat, you put on the face mask, the shield that's in there provided for you, obviously no eating, things like that. But has anybody started on protocols for students of what you can and cannot do in the lab?
I mean, we have some general guidelines that we've set up for biology and checked with our safety group on campus. I think the big one that somebody brought up in our department was first aid. I mean, if you're in an anatomy lab and somebody cuts themselves with the scalpel, you would normally run right over and help wash that out and get the Band-Aid on. And I mean, if somebody's injured, we can't not provide help, but how do we safely do that? So even just simple things like that we're trying to write up the best practices.
It sounds like you and I should get together and coordinate some kind of protocol that would be really helpful.
And then put a link to that in the Google Doc, please.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to share what we've written. And like I told my department, it's not going to cover every scenario that we can think of. But maybe the big questions students have or faculty have. I mean, even something like you've got an expensive piece of equipment and the student can't figure it out. How are you going to move them out of the way so you can do what you need to do and get it running again and still follow all these guidelines administration has given us? So
is that true that we're not supposed to be wearing masks when we're lecturing?
I think it's going to vary on college. Co is giving you the option of you can either wear a face shield while lecturing or you can wear a fabric mask while lecturing. But some students who may have hearing impairment, and if they require, they use lip reading, you might want to consider the shield versus the mask. But to my knowledge, Co is telling you do have to wear one or the other while lecturing.
I think we've at Monmouth have been told we have to wear a mask. I don't even know if we're allowed to wear a face shield. And I've actually purchased my own microphone that I'm going to wear. So
you might discuss this with your administrators. I think this is something that's come up relatively recently this concern that, oh, that's right, there's a whole lot of people out there who do lip reading and they are really disenfranchised with the whole mask business. And this just came up at St. Olaf, for example, and I don't think there's a solution. There hasn't been any policy specifically.
I think the thing is we have a whole bunch of faculty who are insisting on masks and that face shields aren't good enough. So there's a conflict there.
Well,
And I'm
can I just say-
faculty, and I'm faculty, and I rely a lot on lip reading myself. I'm hard of hearing in both ears. I'm concerned about my communication when all students are wearing masks. So I'm a little worried about that.
And I would say it's not just individuals who are hard of hearing, but also a lot of students for whom English is a second language.
Agree.
Right? Like not being able to see your mouth is also makes it just that much harder to understand what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. I've
Yeah.
noticed that myself. Okay, so +1 for face masks. I mean, the shields.
Shields, yeah.
Or online.
Or online.
Are face shields without masks protective enough?
Not according to the CDC.
Yeah.
They're not.
And at St. Olaf, I don't think we even have that option. We have an online training about the PPE and what we need to do to return to campus. And it says we all have to wear masks because the face shield is not sufficient and we're following CDC guidelines, and they say no.
Yeah, I think the face shield could be an extra layer of protection that's keeping virus out of your eyes, for instance. I don't see it as an alternative to wearing a mask at all. There are cloth face shields, cloth masks that have little cutouts and plastic. I don't know how well they work, and that maybe they just get bogged up immediately, but I am looking at those.
I think there's been a lot of discussion these last weeks about instructional recording and that sort of thing. Tom, I don't know how much you've been in on the other ones, but what I got out of that was keep them very short, break 50-minute lectures into 10-minute chunks or 15-minute chunks, think more modular concepts rather than day by day throughout the whole course, that sort of thing. In terms of laboratory, we're planning on sharing the responsibilities for pre-lab lecture, all recorded, so that we do have a little bit more time in lab, should we have labs, and making that not the face-to-face sort of pre-lab discussion.
Just for what it's worth, I broke all the rules in the spring, met for 70 minutes every time, took questions, got them to ask me questions, recorded the back and forth on the concepts that we were talking about. The questions often ran over into over the 70 minutes, but also ran over into the evening, into email discussion. I think that what I've got to offer is the face-to-face interaction. So I'm not buying the break it into smaller chunks wisdom. I don't think that's what I do well.
I have to agree with Tom. When I experimented both ways in the spring, and the students were totally disconnected by just watching the videos and that I made, and then I reverted back to meeting, and it was much better, I think. I mean, they did things pretty well, so.
And that was a full online situation.
Yeah, that was a full online situation, yeah. So if we go back to full online, I will do that. I mean, the thing that I worry about is the freshmen who are in Gen Chem will be totally disconnected, because I already had that relationship with all the students I was teaching in the spring. And that I worry about the incoming students. I'm not so worried about our, juniors and seniors. Well, I am worried about them not getting our integrated lab class, but where they have to work with the instruments. So, but other than that.
Not with it. Okay, here's what I would like to get some feedback with, though. Brian and I had talked about some possibilities for follow-up. I don't have a set follow-up plan, but I would like to hear from you and see if you want to do some sort of follow-up, whether it would be a different kind of breakout group or return to these same kind of groups to talk one more time during the week. One of the things I did outside of these sessions was to have a local breakout from just my institution on Wednesday last week, and then when we came back on Friday, that was nice to have had that discussion. So I'm going to leave that open for right now and get back to you maybe tomorrow about what the decision is on that. But all the feedback you want to give me, let me know, and we'll do it, because I think we have a limited opportunity here to do this sort of thing, and then we're going to be all completely consumed. So thank you. Brian, am I